Good afternoon if you're here on the East Coast, or good day wherever you may be. Thanks so much for joining us today. And welcome to Descriptive Depth at Scale, Exploring New Technologies for Archives. My name is Roger Schoenfeld. I'm the Managing Director of JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services. And we're really excited to have a chance to host this conversation today. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. We are recording the webinar. We'll be happy to share a link to the recording to everyone after the event, so hopefully that will be helpful. And we will make sure to have some time towards the end for questions. Please feel free to submit questions at any point. There's a question box that, at least for me, appears on the upper right-hand corner, and I'll make sure that we ask a series of questions along at that point in the session. So to get started, I'm really delighted today that we will have a chance to go through some work from two of my absolute favorite colleagues. If we can, yeah, there we go. We commissioned Emilie Hardman to lead what turned into a report called Bridging Capacity and Care last year. This work was really intended from our organization's perspective to really listen deeply to practitioners, archivists, special collections librarians, and others involved in distinctive and digital collections to surface the lived experiences of the community. This kind of approach for us, it's absolutely foundational. In our work, we want to be able to address challenges and opportunities that really deeply reflect the practices and needs of the practitioner community. And certainly not prescribe solutions of our own. So Emilie's report is really powerful. It's publicly available. You're welcome to use that QR code or search for it, and you'll be able to get a copy of it if you haven't already seen it yourself. But what emerged from that report was a real wide spectrum of practitioner perspectives, everywhere from real enthusiasm to deep skepticism about various kinds of new tools and approaches in special and distinctive collections. What we want to do today is really zoom in on some of the core shared tension that emerged as a central theme in some of the dynamics facing archivists, balancing limited capacity with ethical commitments to care, description, and community accountability. Our purpose here is to bring to you today a practitioner-first conversation. We want to explore how some values-aligned tools like JSTOR Seeklight can support things like reparative description, not replace human judgment. And our approach to this work, we believe, reflects accountability and care and relationship building with the communities that are working on these materials and these collections. So so I hope that as I say, I hope that if you haven't had a chance to do so already, you'll take a look at this report. As you can see, this wonderful quote here: "Special collections and archives act as custodians of time, preserving records of the past while responding urgently to the present. The work of archives and special collections today is not merely a reflection of what was, but an ongoing negotiation with what might be." And we have some things we'd love to share with you today supporting that. So with that said, let me introduce our two presenters, my two colleagues. Emilie Hardman is an archivist whose career has been centered in special collections and archives, with roles at the University of Arizona at the Center for Creative Photography, where serving as the head of archives and digital strategy, also at MIT as the founding head of distinctive collections, and as the head of teaching, learning, and digital scholarship at Harvard's Houghton Library. Emilie's academic background is in sociology, with a focus on qualitative methods and sociology of culture. Emilie is a really strong researcher and is the author of that report that I've just been mentioning, Bridging Capacity and Care, a field report of archives and special collections. And Jen Saville serves as a senior user experience researcher here at Ithaca, focusing on JSTOR digital stewardship services. Jen draws on a background in design and marketing, as well as academic training in human-centered design and engineering. And she leads qualitative evidence-based research that has informed the development of a number of innovative initiatives here at Ithaca, including JSTOR Seeklight. Jen has a specialty in translating user insights into strategies that enhance access, support stewardship, and guide future investments in tools that help libraries and archives advance their mission. Jen is the person who, or one of the people, who has been working really closely with our user community and participant community to translate those needs into building JSTOR Seeklight and JSTOR stewardship. So anyway, I'm thrilled to bring with you two really fantastic colleagues of mine and have a chance, I hope all of us together today, to explore some really, really interesting themes and work. So with that, we are going to turn things over to Emilie in just a moment, who will be getting us started on some work that you'll see here, and then Jen will come forward in a couple minutes, and then I'll return to moderate questions. So thank you so much, and Emilie, over to you.
Thanks so much, Roger. I really appreciate that introduction and the invitation to be here with you all today. So as Roger mentioned, I serve, among other things, as Senior Curator for Reveal Digital. And at Reveal, we work with libraries, museums, communities to build open digital collections on themes that we really believe extend the Ithaca mission to improve access to knowledge and education. And today I want to talk about one of our current efforts, a collection that it has been my really great privilege to work on, which is the HIV, AIDS, and the Arts collection. And I want to look at that collection really specifically to explore this utility and the opportunities in using Seeklight, which is, as Roger mentioned, the JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services AI collection processing tool. And what I want to explore really specifically is a question around how it might be utilized to confront and correct the absences in the description of these materials with a goal of supporting a more equitable, affective, and discoverable cultural record. So this question of utility and opportunity really arises for me, particularly in the context of descriptive labor for archives, special or distinctive collections, having been shaped increasingly by austerity, even at the most well-resourced institutions, to say nothing at the least. The work of description on the whole has trended towards what gets called the golden minimum, which I think is a way of glossing the generally infinite deferral of detail to the disservice of users and to potential users of these materials. The conditions of resource starving for description has created an environment of what I think of as descriptive debt. And so I'm really interested in what is possible to do within a rapidly changing technological landscape to create more, not less metadata, to do richer and more detailed contextual work, and bring a heightened, not lessened sense of value to the descriptive work that knowledge workers produce. I am not insensible of the reasons for a folder and box level description, but I want to think beyond them into this space as a counterpoint that I'll call descriptive depth. So I want to orient us really quickly to the collection I'm focusing on, and if we could just advance the slide. Yeah, thank you. Which documents artistic and activist responses to the HIV/AIDS crisis. It seeks really specifically to move beyond like a spotlight on canonical works and artists and focuses on archival process work, behind the scenes organizational infrastructure work, ephemera, things like that. And its coverage runs from fine art to agitprop. Sometimes very little is known about these materials. It was not at all uncommon during the height of the AIDS crisis for archival materials to be, simply dropped at the doorstep. So saving them was what there was capacity to do. And that urgency meant that while materials were protected from loss, the descriptive scaffolding around them may have been more or less infinitely deferred. Now, I've just situated these particular materials in a historical context that explains and justifies the lack of metadata, but I think many of us know. In fact, what I'm describing is almost totally unremarkable. Indeed, it's like common and essentially expected in our MPLP or more product, less process era. And as a field, it's generally understood that archivists just don't do item level description, and processing efficiencies are really prized. So resource constraints have shaped our practices, but further, I think they have shaped what we allow ourselves to envision. This drive to make things nominally accessible has become a common sense limit that effectively constrains what we even consider possible as regards descriptive work. And so for this field, we've shaped archival practice as a practical compromise in the face of historically ceaseless European records of bureaucracy. Like that has transported us into what is still now professional orthodoxy around this. And we've normalized the idea that things like a playbill for a healing ritual performed by women, by and for women living with AIDS doesn't need to be described individually. And we accept that collaboratively created artworks used in dance performances are just effectively described as miscellaneous performance material. So in thinking about how to, while working with these digital collections, make them the most accessible, the most discoverable and useful, I have over the course of this past year been working on evaluating and assessing the possibilities of this tool, Seeklight. And I should be clear from the start that this is a pilot, it's an exploration, it's an interrogation. Like we want to understand the value, the potential problems, and dig into all the considerations of bringing a tool like this into our workflow, just as you might with your institutional context. We are not in a fully productionized situation with Seeklight currently. This is kind of like on the sides, just for full transparency there. Okay, so let's look in broad strokes at the fundamentals of what Seeklight does. It is not at all my intention to fully demo the tool, but I want to give you some sense of what's going on. That could be helpful, right? So materials are loaded here. They can either be loaded as discrete items or as compound objects. And this box at the bottom here, the optional box, it invites context, which can help shape the output. It can also be a place I've been experimenting with for more structured prompting, which we will talk about later, to try to take more control over my outputs from Seeklight. So once loaded, the materials are run through Seeklight, and I want to say this really specifically. It does not retain or train on these materials, even within a hyper, local like JSTOR context, which I do think has upsides and downsides when you're thinking about scaling processing work, and you might kind of want to be in an environment where knowledge is built about your collections, but we should pick that up as a conversation during Q&A. I'm certainly not the final word on that, but it's an interesting piece. So then we get to the dashboard in Seeklight, and that shows you the output. So after I've run it through, we're getting back essentially modified Dublin core, though we are really actively exploring other schemas and mapping possibilities. Seeklight evaluates the materials to do named entity identification, dates, subjects, and such, placing those core metadata into these fields, as you can see. Seeklight also outputs narrative description that draws from the item itself and potentially from the prompt that could be entered in that previous screen. And all of this is editable, changeable by a person working with these data. All right, so let's dig into a couple examples. The C.D. Arnold papers came to us with this really brief description, which is actually simply more than half, I think, a list of his works, though few, if any, are broadly known. So it has really little to draw a user in. But digging into the collection, you can learn that Arnold strongly identified in public life as a gay playwright and created works that explored desire, community, and connection. He contributed to early work of the theater, which explored the complexity of living within an epicenter, San Francisco, of the HIV/AIDS crisis. And his obituary, it has a paragraph, about his playwriting, but in the main, it actually talks about the people he loved and was loved by. It opens by saying, Arnold died of complications from AIDS in the arms of his longtime lover, Steve McDowell, within a close circle of his friends. And this, the love, the community, the connections, like It is all part of his story that really deserves to be told, yet it exists as one page in the midst of thousands. But Seeklight kind of helped highlight it for me, stood out as a distinction, a distinct item. And so I can just tell you this story. There's no Wikipedia page, there's little else left behind that surfaces the substance or the texture of his life. But in scanning the metadata output from the tool, this love stands out. And it is surely a significant part of telling the story of this time. And it is a legacy of it. Some of those thousands of pages that I mentioned in the collection are made up of draft upon draft of plays that have also faded from cultural visibility. And these images are some of the cleaner, easier to parse ones in the collection. So it is not easy skimming that you would have to do to develop a sense of what's going on. A good number of these drafts are not titled, or they have kind of fragments of multiple works lumped together. So it makes perfect sense to me that an archivist would not be able to find the time and apply the effort to teasing out all of the finer points. We're going to start with titles here. So thinking about those drafts that I just showed you, here's what the finding aid calls an almost box's worth of material in the collection. It's just manuscripts and typescripts of various plays. However, when I run this through, the tool actually suggests this item is not just a various typescript or manuscript, it is a play, Bookstore, by C.D. Arnold, and it is a typescript with holographic corrections, certainly more specific and descriptive. And these, I think maybe more interestingly, are the subjects that the collection came with. We get 3 terms from the gender, sex, and sexual orientation ontology, which was created by and is used primarily within healthcare research settings to bring a culturally specific focus to LGBTQ plus populations. We got theater, gay men, and diaries. So these are obviously inherited from a collection level subject classification, and they don't tell us anything really about the play itself. Also, we aren't making use of a more applicable vocabulary. So in my prompt for Seeklight, I asked it to suggest terms that were appropriate from Homosaurus. And I get back now terms that feel like much more authentic and usable pathways into this specific play. So from Library of Congress, I get LCSH like gay theater, homophobia, social isolation, themes of the play. And then in keywords, which could be linked in a keyword field in a DAM environment, while the Homosaurus then could be mapped to or overlaid on the LCSH, we get things like urban isolation, LGBTQ plus chosen families, lateral homophobia, and queer spaces. Might someone be interested in writing or learning about mutualism or queer spaces in the 1980s? It seems to me that would be so. And at least I would want to be able to search like that, or to tell someone that they're welcome to search in that kind of way and be assured of finding results that support their inquiry using that kind of thematic inquiry into these collections. Also, there's something that feels really important to me about moving from a generic LOC homophobia to Homosaurus's much more precise and illuminating term of lateral homophobia. And I know someone is probably reasonably suggesting that there are a lot of terms here and that some are just colloquial, but I think we absolutely know that people search with natural language and bring incredibly diverse areas of interest to their searches. And I hope metadata supports all of that kind of inquiry and more. So I also want to show you Seeklight output for the aboutness of this play, speaking of these kind of thematic inquiries. So it previously lacked even a specific title in this part of the finding aid and in the digital collection, even without in ours on reveal. But in this, we start to compare no apples to apples, and here's what we learn. The play is set in a small adult bookstore on Christmas Eve. The script explores themes of isolation, homophobia, sexuality, chosen family, survival, and mutual aid within a gay urban culture of the 1980s. And the play reflects the intersection of artistic practice and AIDS-related activism and provides insight into LGBTQ community spaces and artistic responses to marginalization and stigma. Okay, so another example. This time we're going to look at a playbill, which we know is going to have a ton of information to sort through, lots and lots of named entity identification that can be done, and a person is never going to have the time to do all of that. But obviously, these things can also be really highly relevant to social network mapping and to exploration of community connections. So this is C.D. Arnold's play Morning Metro. It was staged in 1985 by Theater Rhinoceros, which is a queer theater company in San Francisco, alongside the New AIDS show, and Robert Chelsea's Night Sweats, which was one of the first plays to address the HIV crisis in theatrical production. On its own, Morning Metro would be a play that many would not know to look for or know about. It is mentioned just once, as far as I can tell, in all of the secondary literature on JSTOR, and as an employee, I can see everything there. So I think we can say it's a relatively unknown play. It needs more of this context to situate it within the cultural landscape. But here, our description just shelves it under Theater Rhino promotional materials. So this is what I get when I don't prompt Seeklight with any of the information. If we can go to that next slide. Yeah, so here's the info. It's definitely richer than Theater Rhino promotional materials, but it's also basically, or at least I interpret this as kind of telling me what a playbill is. It has some named entities though, which I start to get really excited about, but there's also something really strange that I get alerted to right away once I start scanning those named entities. This Virginia Wolf Club, for example, I could not figure out what was going on because I don't know a Virginia Wolf Club, and I feel like I am a person who would know because I know Virginia Woolf. Like I know her marmoset's name. It is Mitz, and for fun, this next slide is going to be Mitz, who I've taken the liberty of outlining because there's no autofocus and poor Mitz blends a little. All to say though, like I'm into Woolf. I am versed in the Woolf Sackville West correspondence. I know the tilt of her chin as she gazes out the window, and I have never been invited to join a Virginia Woolf Club. So either I have really been left out in the cold, or I thought, well, it's an AI hallucination. But I went back into the document and I took a look around and I found something really interesting that I would have never locked onto, especially in a processing mode because time. And I noticed this series of fundraising levels that are listed in the back of the playbill that includes that Virginia Woolf Club, which I had not been invited to. It's a tiered fundraising structure, and they're framed as clubs named after queer literary and theatrical figures. And this offers a really interesting entry point for scholars concerned with how queer cultural institutions constructed community through this kind of like symbolic affiliation. They evoke these figures and mobilize like a canon of queer creativity as both aspirational and associative capital, one that is affirming queer presence, history, and value. And maybe from a library metadata perspective, this is useful to highlight, maybe not, but I think it's something that would have been utterly invisible. And it does something that I think I want of AI, in that I want it in this position of assisting me and drawing my attention to things I might not have had time to give that attention to. And it's this kind of compelling paratextual feature that standard description would 100% overlook. But it is the kind of patterned detail in the form of named entity work that assistive AI can flag for our attention. And I don't know if folks read Professor Ethan Mollick's One Useful Thing Substack, which I do recommend. He just wrote this piece on wizard style AI that is opaque in its reasoning, decides what it thinks we want, and then makes metaphorically magical decisions without our collaboration about how to accomplish it. But the design of Seeklight, as Jen will walk us through, like is designed to count on the archivist in the loop. So it is doing more of this kind of specific filtering and sorting of information from these materials and routing it into categories, from the field for us to review. So here's the output of my playbill, processed with my prompt, which asked Seeklight to surface the people involved in the production specifically and suggested that I want to highlight, connections to the HIV/AIDS crisis. I wanted to tell you stories about these things highlighted, but there really isn't time. So I'm just going to kind of point to them and say, like, these are, named entities that, as you can see, like, we get so many more that really open up explicit pathways into, theatrical arts that are connected to so many research inquiries that one might make. I want to take one quick rabbit hole here too, since I've shown you examples of the output with and without my prompt. So as I was saying earlier, in Seeklight, there's this context box. But I think that many of us using Seeklight have kind of figured out this box also provides the opportunity for us to try to guide output more. And I've tried to construct a prompt that will help us understand this playbill, not just as a record of the show, but as an ephemeral piece of evidence that makes visible the infrastructures of queer theater during the crisis. And I've been kind of going through my prompts and essentially diagramming them to think about what I intend to hope to get them to produce for me. So just as an example, I'm going to just jump to one here. With my phrase, provide evidence-based insight into likely aboutness, noting themes clearly supported by the content. I'm working to establish intellectual access and link the text and content to the broader themes, but only where they are directly supported. So with the description output guided by my prompt, we're able to move away from that rather unhelpful description of essentially what a playbill is toward what this playbill is evidence of. And it sets up all those research hooks that can be used to explore things. So, I mean, the question is then maybe like, what do these examples offer beyond just the particulars of output? I think they show us how rich description can optimize discovery for people who don't already know what they're looking for, and demonstrates then through the reverse how much work we have tended to offload onto researchers who have the time, the training, or social proximity, to navigate the collections. And I think in this way, what I see is that minimal description doesn't just obscure detail, it actually allocates advantage. So looking here for ways of evening that out for all researchers. I want to spend the little piece of time I have left on one last example. This is from the Wendy Rauter papers. It's a call for participants to come to a theatrical troupe for people with HIV/AIDS. But what I really want to talk about with it is another feature in Seeklight, which is this collection summary feature. That feature is something you can select once you've loaded your full collection into the platform, and it generates like a baby finding aid, which might not always be appropriate depending on the workflow, but when you have a significant group of materials that are associated, it's a nice thing to generate so you can build insight across the materials. The description that came with this collection does note Wendy was the founder of this group, but it doesn't offer any detail on who she was or what her interests were, her motivations, or her positionality. And I find the subject headings particularly tough because we get gay men, but we have Wendy, who identifies as a lesbian, and with these subjects, she is erased in the silence around lesbian contributions to HIV/AIDS crisis. And in reprocessing the collection as a collection with Seeklight, including that very brief statement of the fact or two I know about Wendy, Seeklight's able to start to point to these dynamics and erasures and frame the materials in a very different way, as you can see here. So I'm closing out with this image from artist, writer Joe Brainerd. It's a pansy that he drew. Brainerd died in 1994 of AIDS-related pneumonia, and in floriography, the pansy signals thought from Ponce, forgive my French. In queer history, pansy is a long-standing slur that queer artists and communities have repeatedly reframed and reclaimed. And Brainerd returned to this motif regularly in his work, building meaning through precise and serial attention. I think that's the work I'm advocating for, like descriptive depth as careful, repeatable attention that names what's there, records how we know it, and refuses to let lives and labor be flattened by thin description. And I'm certainly not trying to say or argue that AI is the one and only way that this applies, or that it applies well to all situations, but I think there are applications in it that help us do what we have not been resourced to do, which is describe at nuance, at scale, and in ways that invite broader publics into these materials. So thanks, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. I'm going to turn it over to Jen.
Hey, hi everyone. So thank you, Emily. My name is Jen Saville, and I am a user researcher here at JSTOR. I work on the user insights team. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the work I do and really show sort of how we work with the community. And so I'm coming at it from a different lens, a bit more our like product and user research, user insights lens that is sort of, you know, part of how we build JSTOR and grow here. So I started with JSTOR, you know, the digital stewardship team, and in the early days, pre-pandemic, when we had JSTOR Community Collection. So it was sort of a new place that we launched to provide access to essential, you know, archive and special collections materials. And for some institutions, community collections represented their only hosting platform. And for others, an additional platform to amplify and increase the usage of these collections. So I'm here to tell you a little bit more about how this sort of led to Seeklight, and how we work with the community, and tie it back a little bit to what Emily shared as well. Next slide. So after launching JSTOR Community Collections, which later became JSTOR Shared Collections, we learned through conversations and feedback sessions with our community that, you know, there was a lot of struggle with the entire digital archives ecosystems. And what stood out is that simply hosting their collections on JSTOR was not enough. The real pain began much further upstream before JSTOR. So our first large-scale investigative research study focused on interviewing library deans and directors from over 60 higher ed institutions around the world. And we set out to just learn about, like, what is the state of special collections and archives at your institution? And repeatedly, we heard what Roger and Emily have already mentioned: backlogs of unprocessed collections with less than 5%, I believe, less than 5% even digitized, a growing number of born digital materials and media, minimal descriptive metadata, which leads to poor discoverability and low accessibility, and finally, you know, fragmented silos, and especially in the case of born digital, no or non-existent workflows. So the ever-changing and costly array of software and systems were both a reality and a great source of frustration. The next slide. There we go. Okay, so one of the many insights that stood out in our research is that creating descriptive metadata is a time-consuming and labor-intensive process, which often serves as a barrier to digital collections processing. And for almost all of the institutions we interviewed, access is the ultimate goal, and libraries are very interested in automation to get there. So we set out to develop solutions to help speed up the generation of descriptive metadata and automate more aspects of the digital collections processing. And I started lightweight in this research with sketches and tested these paper prototypes to gather more input about our ideas. It really was not a place where we were committing to anything. We're just starting out. Yeah. And I also conducted feedback sessions and co-design workshops with archivists and librarians in the field. And our team wanted to better understand First of all, collections processing workflows. Is it consistent? Are there patterns there? And also figure out where our intervention would add the most value. Next slide. So practitioners were skeptical about metadata generation, emphasizing the deeper and the finer points that honor their expertise and professionalism. So tools tools must support reparative description and respect ethical metadata practices and prioritize community care and accountability over pure efficiency. And JSTOR Seeklight was built with these values in mind. Seeklight provides guardrails to avoid harmful and biased language in the metadata output, an ongoing commitment to improving the quality of Seeklight metadata, and finally a policy of human in the loop, which means that practitioners have complete oversight and control over their metadata. And for the AI accountability, there are some AI accountability measures there too, such as confidence scores. How confident is the system in the both quality and accuracy of the metadata output? Built-in AI generated labels. So in the output, we have AI generated that provides ethical transparency. So next slide. Yeah. So working with generative AI, our engagement with experts in the community informs some early product development principles, especially when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence. So security and transparency are critical. Our participants share their concerns about the use of AI and the need for assurance that their data is safe and not being used to train a large language model. And as Emilie mentioned, yes, and if they could train it on their data, that would be nice too. But in general, they don't want to train a large language model on their own data. Maintain human oversight of AI solutions. So participants expect complete control over the AI-generated metadata output in terms of reviewing and editing and providing feedback when the output is incorrect. Our system needs to support diverse workflows and scale. So whether it's for like a lone arranger or a large, well-resourced team. And finally, we must provide seamless integration into existing systems to eliminate time-consuming workarounds. So despite this being really early input, we still strive to live by these principles today. So next slide. Great. So JSTOR Stewardship with Seeklight officially launched on June 23rd, 2025, and is supported by our JSTOR Stewardship Charter participants. We conduct user interviews, concept testing, usability studies, surveys, site visits, just many activities with them. This research is aimed at exploring both opportunities to refine our system and to grow into new areas. So this partnership is mutually beneficial. We want to hear it all, despite not being able to do it all right away. However, once a pattern in user feedback and user requests is detected, we take into account the impact of the problem we could solve. So, and where additional functionality could fit into our product development roadmap. We think about reframing big projects into kind of solution phases. So, what's now, what's next, what's long-term. And it's so like in this now category, we're launching Seeklight transcripts, which is an LLM-driven HTR feature, which is handwriting text recognition. And this was a highly requested feature by our charter participants. And we are actually launching on Monday, September 30th. So that's really exciting, and that's now. And then when we think about next, we're thinking about additional transcript functionality because, you know, we work iteratively and we grow based on what we learn. Additional metadata fields. We're exploring that user input context box that Emilie mentioned and how to make improvements to the functionality there. We're exploring audit tools for PII and sensitive information. And some longer term initiatives look like end-to-end digital collections processing, finding aid integration, custom metadata fields, and automated metadata enrichment. Next slide. So finally, Emilie's HIV/AIDS and the Arts case study shows what's possible. Collections made visible with care, accountability, and representation. And in this case, JSTOR Seeklight was instrumental in bringing to light a collection that was previously overlooked, thereby demonstrating its potential to amplify underrepresented voices. That outcome exists because practitioners shaped Seeklight itself. We're committed to co-developing and designing with our charter participants and with their needs in mind. So that's all I have to share today. Thank you so much. And I will now turn it over to Roger to wrap things up.
Thanks so much, Jen, and thanks, Emilie, as well. I know you're both going to pop back on in just one second as we take some questions. I just wanted to kind of reflect on the fact that much of what we've explored here today, that you've both explored here today in this webinar, it's about how we, our organization, is working to fulfill not only our mission, but really ultimately to be in service to the communities that we work with. The archivists, special collections, distinctive collections, digital collections, communities in the case of JSTOR stewardship, and those that you all serve, knowledge seekers, researchers, students, etc. So, you know, hopefully these presentations have maybe also provided some considerations to think about in terms of what the future can look like around how primary source materials, distinctive collections can be described, how they can be made available. As Jen sort of emphasized there towards the end, you've heard a lot about metadata in today's talks, which is a lot of what we focused on to date in terms of building Seeklight, but there is much more that we're in the process of building in Seeklight to make collections processing work better. We hope better for all institutions, including those who may be resource stretched or units that may be resource stretched, but maybe more significantly even to make collections processing better for end users, right? Better for those communities that that we collectively work in service to. The ultimate vision that we have here at JSTOR Stewardship is to transform discovery and impact for special and distinctive collections, just as JSTOR began doing 30 years ago for journal back files. We think there's a similar kind of opportunity, transformative opportunity, to do that. So that said, let me ask Emilie and Jen to rejoin me. We have a couple of questions that have come in, but I do want to just take a moment to encourage anyone who has questions for us, either about the specific work that Emilie and Jen described, or more broadly, to feel free to put questions in, and we'll surface those now. I guess I'll start with a specific one. I think this will be probably for you, Jen, which focuses on the transcription question. So it asks, I think this question may have come in before your slided question. Does JSTOR have any plans to expand the functionality of Seeklight that can be used to transcribe digitized historical documents? I'm working on a project to transcribe documents owned by the Cherokee Nation, and using AI to do so currently feels anathema, given what this questioner sees as being violation of data sovereignty principles in LLMs. So Jen, would you feel comfortable speaking just a little bit further there?
Sure. I hopefully have answered the question before a little bit, but yes, we do. We're launching our transcription tool, which is part of Tier 3 and Seeklight, and it is using HTR and LLM-driven HTR technology. And we, as I mentioned, we don't use the data that our participants upload into our system to train any sort of model.
Yeah, and I would just add, I would encourage the questioner. We can certainly get into more specifics about exactly what's meant here by data sovereignty, but certainly as I understand it, we're not doing something that should violate those principles. Let's maybe step back for a second. I'd love to just ask you both. We've heard a lot in the way that each of you has described work that you've taken on about balancing care with capacity and some of the trade-offs that indicates. Could you each maybe just speak a little bit about where you have seen that tension either in your work or as something that you're working to help resolve? Emilie, maybe you'd like to start there.
Sure. I mean, I'm trying to think of places where like that tension doesn't exist. I think it's kind of an omnipresent tension. I've really been sitting with this thing. We run these working groups as part of our charter program. And last week, Jen and I were in a session where someone basically said, we haven't solved the archival problems of the 20th century yet, and now we're in this really, really different technological moment. Things are moving so fast. The way that education is transforming, the way that knowledge seeking is transforming, like that's where I get somewhat overwhelmed with the capacity question, because obviously we care about the materials, we care about the collections, we care about the creators of those collections and the people who produce new knowledge with them. So how does that care meet capacity in this moment when things change so rapidly and we don't necessarily have resolution or answers to like how to meet those care, how to introduce the primary sources at scale? I have these experiences regularly where I look for something that I know exists and I can't find it, in the world, and I'm like, where is it? Like, we want those things to be there and kind of immediate to people's fingertips, but that's what we're, I think, working towards, is like, how do we keep imagining the future and the solutions that bridge, where we are with capacity and how much we care for these things and the people who use them.
Thanks, Emilie. Jen, did you want to add anything to that?
I mean, you pretty much summed it up. I can tell you just a little, I'll add a little flavor from my lens and how I've been working with participants and hearing, sort of about their own capacity and sort of desire for description levels that, concern about the item level versus, folder level and description that could be available. And we're taking that to heart because it's important to meet that capacity, and then also understand, we're also trying to balance out that need for that granular data to help discovery and access to. So I think it's something to demonstrate we're struggling with it, but we're also considering it and taking perspectives here too.
Thank you. We've had a bunch of questions coming in sort of fast and furious, so I'm going to try to bring a couple of them together into a question here. Could we talk a little bit about the range of content types that we've tested through Seeklight? Is it just image, just text? How does it work with specific kinds of image or text or compound object collections? Are video or audio, moving image, etc. collections either already working or being investigated? Could we just talk a little bit about that? I'm not sure who to ask. Jen, do you want to get started with that?
Sure. Yes. So currently, our system handles JPEGs and PDFs. We are looking to soon launch the ability to handle, TIFFs. So And on JSTOR, we do support AV materials, but Seeklight currently doesn't. So I think that's an important thing to point out. And as far as we are, I would say constantly beating up the system with all sorts of materials, photographs of varying levels of quality, handwritten documents of varying age and quality, all kinds of, PDFs with tables and graphs and handwritten, letters with tables. And we're just throwing everything at it to, find out what's working well and, where we need to improve. So I would say, we've done lots of mixed media as well. And Seeklight handles text, based, of course, very, I would say most accurately, but still a lot is coming out. We're getting very positive responses to, the types of output we're getting with, photograph and mixed media materials as well. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Emilie, with your personal experience.
Yeah, just to say there's a sliver of a way in with AV. Like I do not want to say that the verbalizations within like a video are the only thing that matters. Obviously, it's not, but you can get transcripts that then you can feed into Seeklight that do something, and you can noodle around with some ways of expanding access in that particular way. The image stuff is really interesting too. I shouldn't get deep into the technical pieces of it, but we do handle text and image differently, and the textual extraction from images is also something that I've seen be really, really powerful in working with Seeklight, because I can see the words that are in a photograph, and that's great.
Thanks both. So a couple of questions that would love to ask you really both to reflect on. On the one hand, a little bit more about the kind of AI aspect of this. I think a couple of people are asking questions that suggest they've experimented already with LLMs directly in trying to generate description or perhaps other subject headings, etc. And it sounds like in some cases, they may not fully understand just how much kind of additional engineering and product development we've built already on top of that in constructing Seeklight. So in a couple of cases, one person notes that they've seen a lot of hallucination that needed to be manually fixed. They're wondering how much hallucination, if any, have we experienced while have you experienced using Seeklight, particularly in the creation of controlled vocabularies. And then another person asks about Emilie, in your description, the demonstration of prompting that you offered suggested a very lengthy and specific prompt for a single item. Is that representative of how Seeklight is used, or is it possible to scale the tool in other ways? So maybe you could just talk a little bit about like the how it's actually used, and some of the AI aspects of that, hallucination aspects of that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just a noodler, like, and that's sort of where we are with Seeklight. Like, we want to see what does change the outputs. I love this kind of like far edge case experimentation where you're like, in reality, we would not, lovingly construct and then diagram our prompts for everything. Like that is not really reasonable. But like, what does it do? What does it facilitate? And are there then ways that informs the engineering of the tool itself, so that we can like bring in that kind of attention or query regularly, to sort of alter the output so that at a collection level or a box level, a folder level, like someone could do a much lighter weight thing, maybe even just drop in donor notes. But we've started to structure and craft the tool such that it understands the kind of attention and interests that we might have for these collections. So yeah, I'm showing you very, very far edge case thing. I wouldn't expect that to be a normal part of anybody's workflow. Hallucinations, I'm trying to remember the last time I saw something. This was definitely like a bird of prey thing at the beginning of Seeklight, where we're like, hey, it's making up subject headings. We're not okay with that because we're like swooping in and pointing that out. And so these things have been kind of resolved and guardrails and structures put up to prevent that, because it is not just, we're not just talking about like straight line to GPT or Claude here, right? We're talking about like a really significant, highly engineered prompt library and structures that are in place. That maybe that's a great point to hand off to Jen for.
Yes, Emily, I think that's really great that you pointed that out. I think that was something the tool was struggling with right away. We heard lots of feedback about that, and you've explained exactly how we have improved it. This is that kind of feedback builds our ground truth data set behind the scenes, so that it's a set to test against in order to improve the quality of our output, not to train the model. And the rest of the question, I think, was about uploading in bulk versus one at a time, and using those user input, that context field. And it can be done. I think what you can upload in bulk, hundreds of items at a time, and share the context that you have and what's common about those materials. I think is probably the best approach to getting the best quality in bulk. So
I'll just add that I also cut a slide in which I showed a spreadsheet of all our graded metadata, and we have not stopped doing this. So we are building. Jen mentioned that ground truth, like metadata librarians at Ithaca, folks in different places. Like we are spending a lot of time with tabular data, going through grading it, and giving that back to engineering to incorporate and understand like how they should be thinking about the outputs and what we experience when we're actually working with this metadata and assessing it for usability.
Thanks both. I'm so sorry. There are so many questions coming in, but we really are right up at the top of the hour. We're so excited. I just want to say I'm so excited by the interest, and in some cases, provocative questions that that folks have been asking. It's really heartening to have a chance. This is just one example of how we love the opportunity to engage deeply and learn from practitioners in our community. JSTOR Seeklight, as you've seen, which you've seen today, is a part of JSTOR Stewardship, JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services. We're really excited to have a chance to introduce it to those of you today for whom it's new, and we'll be sending some follow-up information after the webinar. So thank you all so very much, Emily, Jen. Thank you again, and to everyone who joined us today. It's such a pleasure to have a chance to connect with you. We hope it was helpful. Have a nice afternoon.